Hey, what is going on? Eric Bach here with the Eric Bach Podcast. And today we're going to break down a simple formula to help you eat enough to maximize fat loss. And of course, break down some of the science behind it. Reason this is so important. A lot of people focus on maybe calories, just trying to eat a little bit healthier and wonder, hey, how come I lose a little bit of weight and then I backslide? Well, one of the primary issues that people run into is when they're cutting their calories down, which is, of course, necessary if you want to lose significant amounts of body fat, is they don't really monitor or maximize what their protein intake should be. If you go through a phase and you're trying to cut body fat, but you're not paying attention to what your protein intake is, what you risk is first losing lean tissue. So when you lose lean tissue, you slow down your metabolic rate. You'll probably run into issues with insulin sensitivity. And then third, you're not even going to look that much better if you just get skinnier and lose a bunch of lean muscle, right? And if you want to have muscle definition, be ripped, be able to show it all, then we need to hold on to as much muscle as we possibly can. In addition, protein has a high thermic effect. About 30% of the calories that are in your protein are actually broken down when it comes to the digestive process. The thermic effect of food for protein, 30%, carbohydrates about 6 to 8, and fats about 2 to 3. So if we look at that, if we have a diet that is going to be calorie controlled, but then it's going to be biased a little bit more towards higher protein, well, we're going to be able to eat a substantial amount of food with a higher protein intake and still being able to break down many of those calories just through that thermic effect and breaking them down into usable amino acids. So you can generally eat a little bit more. In addition, satiety, how full that you feel throughout that process, is going to be much better controlled directly by a high protein diet, which across the board means better compliance. If you're not feeling hungry all the time, like you're ready to chew your arm off because you haven't eaten, well, guess what? High protein intake is going to play a huge role in that. Now, we talk about a simple formula to find out how much is enough. And so what I'm going to break down is what we call our 4-4-40 muscle meal method. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit more about the essential components of protein and why it's so crucial. The more aggressively you diet, we have to understand that like total protein is the most important metric by a mile. So it's more important than when you're having your protein, how often you're having, what portion sizes, so on and so forth. If we want to think about a hierarchy, it's going to be overall total protein intake, it's going to be distribution, it's going to be timing. But it's one by a mile before all these other components. So when you see all these diets that are talking about having the perfect protein feeding amount, understand that the most important thing is that you're able to hit that total amount. So as I was alluding to before, though, protein intake when you are in a calorie deficit is going to be higher, right? Because your body's naturally going to be burning calories, stored calories that you have throughout your body. And we want to be able to keep protein intake high so we are not breaking down the stored tissue that we are already having. And so that becomes incredibly important throughout that entire process. And so when it comes to losing body fat, first, what we need to understand is how much protein are we talking? So research by Van Loon et al. I would have to find that exact study, but I know it's definitely Van Loon. The ideal amount of protein is going to be about 0.82 grams to 1 gram per pound of target body weight, right? So for example, a 200-pound guy, anywhere between like 165 to 200 grams of protein, that is going to be kind of that sweet spot, at least for muscle growth. Now, when it comes to fat loss, we would probably want to be closer to that 1 gram per pound of target body weight. So in that case, it would be about that 200 pounds. And again, that reason is when we're in a calorie deficit, our body is going to be going through, it's breaking down tissues that are stored in our body. And inevitably, it's going to break down some lean muscle tissue. And so having that higher protein intake is going to help both in terms of controlling your calories, but it's going to help prevent the breakdown of the stored lean tissue that you already have. So we need to understand that as you're going through a diet, that fat loss aspect, protein intake requirement for your diet does go up, which inherently can also limit some of the food choices that you're having that are not just protein based. So that's something you need to take obviously a bigger stance in. So if we're looking at where your calorie intake is, we got your protein directly at that 1 gram per pound. That means fewer calories for fats, fewer calories for carbohydrates, just something you'll have to factor in directly. Now, how much are we talking about specifically? With leanness, does it make a big difference for men and women? It's going to be very close. For men and women, there's not necessarily a different amount that men or women need. Biologically speaking, it's going to be very similar. But generally speaking, if we have somebody who's going to have higher relative lean muscle mass and lower body fat percentage, they are going to need even higher amounts of protein, right? So for example, somebody who's getting very shredded, say if they're like 6-8% body fat, they're going to have a higher protein intake or requirement to be able to maintain that lean muscle mass without really tapping into losing lean tissue, more so than somebody who's 12, 15, 20%. And so if you think about that, women inherently are going to have higher body fat percentages, right? They have higher fatty stores for reproduction. When we consider that, what does that mean? that's a pretty good indication that, even if we're in the same range, that 0.82 to 1 gram, women will probably need just a little bit less in terms of protein. And so I was using that 200-pound example before. Like, let's say that 200-pound man is about 1 gram per pound of body weight. Cool. Then he's going to be at 200. If it's a 200-pound female, then maybe she's going to be closer to that 160 amount, right? Just as kind of a ballpark, if we want to use that range, I would say men kind of push for the higher area in terms of a limit, and then women a little bit on the lower side. And that should get you to where you want to be. So we know that total protein intake, that's going to be the most important thing. Just as a couple comparisons, somebody who's like 150 pounds, that would be, 150 to 200 grams a day. For somebody who's 175, probably 182 to like 230, 240. For somebody who's 200 pounds, again, now we're talking anywhere from that 164 for really on the low end. And some people are going to be even higher than that 1 gram as needed if you're very low in calories. So as a baseline, again, 0.82 to 1. But then again, if that calorie deficit goes higher and higher, then we're going to actually look at increasing the protein intake a little bit further. So now that we know the rough amount of protein that you need throughout the day, that's the most important thing. Let's say it's 200 grams. Now we have to work on the distribution. So how do we break this down? So what's really interesting is if you look at some of this research, the body appears to be a little bit more lenient and flexible when it comes to protein distribution, when it comes to retaining muscle mass when you're in a calorie deficit, right? So what does that mean? That means, let's say you're in a steep calorie deficit, your body cares even less when it's necessarily distributed because it's going to find a way to break through and use that protein much more effectively based on resources being scarce. There's some research into this, and it's not really all determined yet. The research that I've looked at was from Alan Aragon in his book, Flexible Dieting, a science-based, reality-tested method for achieving and maintaining your optimal physique. And really what they believe could be going on here is, well, when your body's inherently in a calorie deficit, some of the natural protective mechanisms are going to be amplified. And so because of that, it's going to take whatever it can get. When it needs that protein, it's going to break it down and use it much more effectively. Whereas if we're looking for somebody who's trying to build muscle, there's an indication that the optimal kind of feeding or the window from that protein is going to be broken down and digested over a 3 to 5 hour period, which would then indicate we'd probably be a little bit better with more frequent protein feedings. But what we need to understand here is if total intake is the most important thing, what is going to be the consistent intake that you will be able to use to get that amount? And so in the case of 200 grams, right? You could try to eat 100 grams of protein twice per day. Those would be some pretty large meals. Or you can break it up a little bit more consistently. And so as long as we can control for calories and we still hit that protein intake, then we're going to be in a good spot. Now, the third factor we want to focus on, protein-specific timing. Now, again, this is a distant third behind the distribution of protein and way behind the total amount. But does having protein around a workout support better overall training? It does. Now, naturally, when we are in a calorie deficit, as I alluded to previously, when your body does an effective job at breaking down even larger quantities of protein, when you are in a deficit, your body will, of course, take that and apply it directly to your training here. But I find that in many cases, having protein directly around that training itself, can it help retain lean muscle? Yes. Can it help control cravings? Yes. And protein, in addition to carbohydrates, is going to help increase muscle glycogen resynthesis, buffer cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, after you train, and therefore jumpstart your overall recovery. And because recovery is compromised when you're in a calorie deficit, you don't have as much fuel as you normally would, I would say getting protein directly around that training time is going to be very important as well. What do we need to understand about this? And then how do we actually put this into a tangible plan? So to summarize, your total protein is going to be the most important thing. Ideally around 1 gram per pound of body weight, or target body weight is a really good spot to be. The leaner that you get, the higher that protein intake is likely going to have to be. So you're going to be probably that 1 gram per pound of body weight, if not even a little bit higher, especially if you're getting very lean. When it comes to protein intake, whatever frequency you can stick to while you get the total intake is going to be best. For most people, I find that that's going to be breaking up smaller meals throughout the day. Not talking 6, 7, but I'm talking 3 to 4. And then with your workouts specifically, does protein timing matter? It does a little bit if it's going to help you hit that total amount and prevent some cravings, but it's not as important as many of the supplement companies will try to make it out to be when they are trying to sell you every supplement under the sun. Here's what I've found to be best with my time as a coach. When somebody first comes in with us as a client, if we're focused on fat loss, one thing we do is we take them through what we call our insulin reboot protocol. And so this is a variation of intermittent fasting. And the reason that we do this, and we focus on protein and plants, is one, we get rid of a lot of highly processed foods by focusing on protein in plants. Again, we're able to have increased fiber intake, increased protein intake across the board, which is going to help people feel a little bit more satiated. And because we're using a time restricted variation of eating to control for calories, which again is the most important piece, many people actually gain better control over their hunger cravings and hunger signals because there is a 7 to 10 day window where things like leptin and ghrelin, the hormones that trigger different hunger signals and satiation signals inside of our body, have a resetting time. And so we do this for about the first 3 to 4 weeks when I work with somebody because it helps jumpstart fat loss and it helps them get to a place where they can sustainably control cravings a lot more effectively. But after that 30 days, we pivot off something and then we start to implement what we call our 4-4-40 muscle meal method. And again, this isn't really a post about intermittent fasting. I mean, it's something that can work, but in most cases, I found that it doesn't work when people are very stressed out and when they're training hard. And so that ends up being the majority of our people. So we pivot off of that after about 30 days. And so the 4-4-40 muscle meal method is very simple. It is 4 meals about 4 hours apart with about 40 grams of protein per feeding. Now, let's talk about the first 4 meals per day. Very simple. Breakfast, lunch, workout meal, and dinner. Very simple, very straightforward. So this could be something like overnight oats for breakfast. It could be like a meal prep lunch. Say it's like a chicken salad type deal at lunch. Then it could be protein shake with a banana, directly after your workout. And then it could be steak, veggies, and a potato at dinner, whatever, right? Very simple way to set it up. Breakfast, lunch, dinner, post-workout. It's easy to remember, 4 meals, 4 hours apart. Now, research has shown that the maximum kind of anabolic process directly from a meal and the protein breakdown, the muscle protein synthesis after having a meal is 3 to 5 hours. I find that 4 hours is a good spot in terms of, one, sticking to that window, but it also flows directly with many of the meals that we're having. Say it's 8, 12, 4, 8, not necessarily, but like 7, 11:30, 3, 3:30, then you have dinner at like 6:30 or 7, right? It's something easy to remember, and you have a bit of a spacing between what you're eating, and it breaks evenly throughout the day. Finally, about 40 grams or so per meal. So again, that's pretty simple. You can obviously titrate this to be higher or lower based on your body size. So like if your target protein was 120 grams a day, it could be 4-4-30. Or if it was 200 grams, like we alluded to before, 4-4-50. And so what happens here is you just have a very simple system that you can remember. 4-4-40 is, the easiest one to remember across the board, but based on your body size, you can just break that down and it gives you something simple that you can focus on being consistent. Let's say you're 110 pounds. Maybe we have to have 25 grams per meal or 30, right? 4-4-25. You're 160 pounds, 4-4-40. You're 200 pounds, 4-4-50. Keep it very simple. And when you have a simple formula to break down your meals consistently, that's going to help you, A, hit the total intake that you need, B, help you have spacing between those meals so you can control for cravings and take advantage of that increased muscle protein synthesis after a meal. And you have a consistent amount that you're having throughout the day. It's going to allow you to control for cravings a lot better, which is going to allow you to stick with your overall calorie deficit, in addition to providing all the protein that you need in order to maximize lean body composition. Now, if you're checking this out on video right now, specifically on YouTube, what you're going to see is you're going to see a table. This is directly from Alan Aragon, a science-based, reality-tested method for achieving and maintaining your optimal physique. Page 123, I may add, is this gives you a pretty good simple breakdown of what your total daily protein intake should be, in addition to what it is per meal. So if you take a look at that, you can say, okay, yeah, if I have 4 meals with this amount right here, this will get me my target body weight. Very simple way to do it. Because we can have consistent meals. It eliminates confusion. It eliminates, frankly, a lot of complexity. If you objectively look at your diet, you probably eat many of the same foods on repeat already. If we can simply eat better foods on repeat, that can very much simplify the process of having to do any tracking while still helping you accomplish your goals. Can open up, can eliminate decisions, which opens up more headspace. It helps you hit that protein intake that we need as the primary focus when it comes to macronutrients while still hitting your calories for what they need to be when it does come to fat loss. Awesome. So there we have it. There is the 4-4-40 muscle meal method. Very simple, very straightforward. Again, total protein intake is going to be the most important thing that you can focus on in addition to getting your calories dialed in when it comes to fat loss. But this provides a simple, memorable way to be able to eat the right amount of calories to be able to support your goals. And hey, if you are getting a ton of value directly from this podcast, checking it out on YouTube, drop us a comment, drop us a 5-star review, and let us know what you are enjoying. And of course, please share it with a friend. I want to keep this pod as clean of all the advertisements and all that stuff that I know you're just going to hit forward next on every single time. All right. Have a great day, and I will catch you on the next one.
Hey, it's Eric here again. Now, there are 3 ways that I can help you look great naked. Number one, if you want to grab a free copy of the Look Great Naked protocol to help you lose body fat without counting calories, then go to bachperformance.com/free training. Number two, if you're a busy guy looking to build muscle, then I recommend checking out our Minimalist Muscle Blitz, which has helped over 1,000 men build muscle without living in the gym. Just go to minimalistmuscleblitz.com. The link will also be available in the show notes. Or number three, and last, if you want to work with me directly and get the best results possible, apply at bachperformance.com/coaching to look great naked without living in the gym. Until next time, my friend,